So I'm pleased to introduce you today to Mark Limber. Mark is one of those people who has not one, but two outstanding talents, music and mathematics. Mark has been playing classical guitar since before he turned 7. And I have to say, he had a third talent for driving his parents crazy with all his questions. So that's ESP, Mark. And in school, he excelled in math. When it came to deciding a career path, that is to get a job, he chose math, obtaining a PhD in mathematics from the University of Colorado. That led to his being one of the founders of Google in Boulder, where he led the Imaginary Experiences group. And I encourage you to talk to him to find out what the hell that is. However, underneath a finely tuned math and computer veneer, Mark kept the identity of a struggling musician. When he wasn't leading the Imaginary Experiences group at Google or escaping to a second home in the San Juan Islands, he could be found playing the guitar at restaurants, coffee houses, weddings, and concert halls. He would drive to and from in an aging but modestly serviceable 2003 4Runner. As Asleep at the Wheel put it, brakes are good, tires fair. You'll find Mark to be honest, straightforward, articulate, humorous, and passionate about his music, the composers, the compositions, and the amazingly complex instrument we call the guitar. Please give a warm Boulder Rotary Club welcome to Mark Limber.
Yeah.
Where would you want the mic on that side?
Whatever. Hi, everyone. Hi, Mark. We'll get the mic going, and you'll be able to hear me in the back. So enjoy it while you can. I'm going to start.
Well, the slides aren't up yet.
I actually have a better screen. Yeah, here we go. When Merrill asked me to speak, I thought, okay, that's great. I'll put together a little talk. So I put together a 3-hour talk. And then he said, it's 20 minutes, and we want you mostly to talk and not to play guitar so much, which is kind of the opposite of what I'm used to. I'm used to playing guitar a lot, and then, well, actually, I'm used to being supposed to play guitar a lot. I end up talking a lot, and my wife says, you should have played guitar more. So this time I get to talk, or at least I'm supposed to. I'm going to talk about the history and evolution of the classical guitar and its music. But before that, I wanted to talk about me. So here's a picture of me when I was a child. And I want you to notice that while I'm sitting there playing, this will be our sound check. All the other kids are playing, are there, doing volleyball or basketball or bowling. This is a very special park. And I'm not. Why am I not doing that? Well, in part because I'm doing this. And this uses my fingers, and my fingers are very delicate. I can't do anything that hurts my fingers. So in Boulder, that's a real problem because a lot of people like to rock climb. Can't do it. The other thing you might notice is that there's people socializing. No. I did scales. So the big question is, why would a kid who's otherwise normally well-adjusted go off and explore the guitar world so deeply as I did? And to answer that question, we're going to look at a couple things. We're going to look at the history of the physical guitar, this thing that I'm holding right here, and we're going to look at the history of the music that's played on the guitar. The guitar is a little more singular in that you end up with a single thing. The music is broader in that you play a lot of different musicians or composers and pieces and stuff. So here's a brief history. We're going to go into more detail. Don't bother taking notes. Of the evolution of the classical guitar. One thing I know from years and years of giving talks at Google is don't include too many words on a single slide, because then people just look at the words and they won't listen to what you're saying, and it's total loss. So this next slide, I just want you to memorize it. This is sort of an evolution of the music that is currently in vogue for classical guitar. So it starts back here with lute music and works its way all the way over to modern kind of music. Not rock and roll, it's all in the classical vein. So memorize that, and then we'll go through it in detail. Yeah, so what I want to do is start in the 15th century with somebody that actually didn't play guitar. If you remember a couple slides ago, there was no guitar back in these eight years. There were precursors to the guitar, and one of them was not the lute, but I'm going to talk about the lute. So the lute was the instrument of John Dowland. It is important in the modern classical guitar repertoire because the tuning of a lute was very similar to the tuning of a guitar, and a lot of the innovations that were made possible by the lute have been held over into the guitar. So you'll find a lot of lute music played on guitar. I'll just give you a little sample of what this sounds like. Imagine yourself sitting at the Shakespeare Festival on the grass, some guy wanders up, there's people that dress as minstrels and he's playing. That would be typical of lute music, and that was a piece by John Dowland. I have a lot of buttons and things because classical guitar is entirely analog. There are actually two instruments here. The one on top is called the oud, O-U-D. That is a precursor to lute, maybe not a direct lineage, but it's an earlier version. The thing that's different about the lute and that instrument is that instrument was single line. You would play one note at a time, and typically played with a pick, I believe, instead of with your fingers. Lute came along and they introduced a bunch of things that are important to the guitar. I won't go into too much detail, but one of the things was polyphony. You could play chords, you could play different lines, as you heard in that piece, going at the same time. And it introduced this notion of frets, which gives you a much better tuning. One of the difficulties about the lute is it doesn't have single strings, like here's just a single string. It would have two strings for everything. And so that kind of gave it a little bit more volume, which is sort of a problem, but also made it persistently out of tune. After the lute, or after Dowland, we started seeing the rise of the Baroque guitar. I think that's what that is. The screen. That screen's not on, by the way. No. It's okay. Baroque guitar, they got the shape right, but they still have the double strings. Those are called courses. But there were composers that are still played today. So this is Gaspar Sanz. So it sounds, pretty similar to what Dowland was doing, but it's now played on a different sort of instrument. Our next stop in this journey, this is a very abbreviated journey because, like I said, 3 hours reduced to 20 minutes. Are we at? Whoops, wrong way, sorry. Down is forward.
You're holding it upside down.
Oh. Yeah, I don't really understand. Bach. Bach is a huge name in the classical guitar repertoire. In fact, if you've heard classical guitar, you've probably heard Bach being played on the classical guitar. Of course, Bach didn't have a guitar in his time, so he never wrote for guitar. He wrote for a lot of other instruments that are all transcribed to guitar. So I'm going to play just a couple little snippets. This is a piece Bach wrote for violin. Stop, because I kind of get lost in doing it. So that's violin, played on the guitar. He also wrote for cello. You get the idea. He also wrote for keyboard. It goes on and on. There's lots of notes. And he wrote for lute. He wrote lute suites. Turns out, however, as I discovered while I was working on this talk, he didn't actually write for the lute, even though he called it a lute suite. He wrote for that instrument, the lutenvert or something like that. So he was actually writing for a keyboard that was designed to sound like a lute. But we still think of it as a lute sort of instrument. This piece is good. I'm just going to play a snippet. Because it illustrates, a melody and a counter bass line. So you get the multiple voices that a guitar can do, and something like that oud back in the day couldn't do. It goes on and on. But that's a beret from one of his lute suites. All right, so Bach, extremely influential in the guitar music scene, but he didn't write for guitar. Now we're going to move up a few more years, and now we're into the romantic guitar. A romantic guitar fixes something that the Baroque guitar had, because it was... the Baroque guitar had the double strings. The romantic guitar does not. There's a whole slew of guitar composers that came about at this time. There's Giuliani and Sohr and Mertz and all kinds of people. I picked one, Giuliani. He, I think, was friends with Beethoven. But they wrote these amazing, very classical style pieces, he and Sohr and all the rest of them, that you'll recognize the style. Sounds very classical, doesn't it? If any of you know music, it's basically C and G. Stuff like that. About this time, there were other instruments, I'm sorry to say. One of them is, I'm trying to think how I should say this. Soon after, well, these guys, Sohr and Giuliani, they started doing transcriptions, which is when you take a piece written for not guitar, make it work on guitar. The kinds of music they would do were primarily operatic, or they'd take a theme of Mozart and turn it into theme and variations on the guitar. The other composers were doing what composers do, composing, at this time, and having trouble introducing this piece. I love this piece. This is by Chopin. This has nothing to do with the guy that's on the screen. You might have noticed a pattern. A lot of the music. I won't play more of that. A lot of the music that is played on guitar was not written for guitar. All that Bach stuff, not written for guitar. Partly because they didn't have a guitar, pretty good excuse. Partly because just guitar was not a big instrument. It couldn't fill a concert hall. We didn't have mics. So it was kind of a parlor instrument. It was kind of a toy in many ways. Although there were brilliant pieces written for it, it wasn't a big popular instrument, kind of looked down upon. So a lot of music is, we like to say, stolen, because that's how those guitars are. Until this guy came along. I still can't see. Torres. Torres was not well known as a player, but he was the guy who built the first modern guitar. So about 1850, a little bit after that, he built what is essentially this. This guitar's lineage is like 3 generations from Torres. So there was Torres, and then there was a shop called Ramirez that built guitars. This was one of the main luthiers at Ramirez, was a guy named Bernabe, and he built this guitar. So this is sort of a direct lineage, but it's 150 years younger than that guitar. But he built this guitar, and that set off a whole revolution in the classical guitar, because now you could fill concert halls. And now I'm going to change the way I present things. I'm going to move from, so now the guitar is kind of fixed. Basically, guitars haven't evolved significantly since Torres made his guitar. But now what we have is the rise of the performers that we remember. So one of them, Segovia. I can't say enough about Segovia's influence on the guitar. He was, master of technique. He transcribed a ton of pieces. He gave master classes to a lot of the very top guitarists from the 20th century. And he worked with composers to broaden the scope of the music for guitar, music actually written for guitar. So he worked with a lot of composers that normally wouldn't have written for guitar, and had them write music. One of them was this Manuel Ponce, who was a Mexican composer. And I want to give you a sense of his music, not written for guitar, but played on guitar. Really pretty stuff. It's a piano piece. To tune that slightly different. I really wanted to get to this. This is your quiz. Okay, so we have Bach. Everybody remember Bach? Yeah. And we have this guy, Ponce. And we have Segovia. Segovia and Ponce got together and said, we need more music that sounds like Bach, or we need more music that sounds like Scarlatti, or blah, 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 blah. So they worked together. Ponce would compose pieces, and they would publish them as if they were the other people. And so the little quiz here is they did one in the style of kind of Bach. I'm going to call it Bach. They did a piece in the style of Bach. And I'm going to play you a piece that's Bach and a piece that's Ponce, just little snippets of them. And your job is to figure out which one was written by this 20th century Mexican composer and which was written by Bach. So memorize that. That would be choice A. Now that's choice B. One of those is Bach. The other is Ponce. How many think the second one, that one, was Ponce? Okay. I guess I don't have to ask any more questions because everybody else thinks the other. That was Bach. The first piece I played was Pensée. So if you got it right, congratulations. Otherwise, sorry. There's so many buttons to push here. All right, how am I doing on time? Okay. Let's move into a little bit even more modern. So there's this Paraguayan composer, Barrios, who was around in the time of Segovia. In fact, he wrote a lot of pieces, and he was performing in South America, very popular. He met with Segovia, and they hung out in a hotel room, and he played his music for Segovia, and Segovia said, "Oh yes, that's lovely. You know, I'd love to play some of that in concert." I think Barrios played a little bit of. This is a Barrios piece. And Segovia liked it. Sort of wacky. See why Segovia would like it. So he said, "Yeah, I'll play that in concert." Never did. And in fact, later Segovia said, "I don't really like his music. It's kind of trite. I want to work with these major composers." So he never ended up playing any Barrios. However, John Williams, who was a student of Segovia's, and this is, by the way, is not that John Williams. This is a John Williams who played guitar. He made an album of Barrios' music and really popularized Barrios' music, and I absolutely love some of it. I'm going to play a little bit of a rather obscure waltz that Barrios wrote. How could Segovia not want to play that stuff? Isn't that pretty? Yes. John Williams, how many of you have heard of John Williams, the guitar player? He was one of my heroes, partly because of the way he dressed. I mean, that is awesome. He was famous for a lot of different things. He did some brilliant Bach, but he also did this from The Deer Hunter. Great because I don't have to learn the entire piece for any of these. So that's from The Deer Hunter. He did that. He did a major television performance. They featured that. I am going to finish early, possibly. This is amazing. I really fit a lot of stuff in. So John Williams. I did want to mention that this is not all white guy stuff. These are some of the sort of earlier-ish and mid to late and still active women players that are very influential. Ida Presti played with Lagoya. They had a famous duo, but she was also on her own. The best rendition of Pavane for a Dead Princess for two guitars I've ever heard is her duo with Lagoya. Look it up. It is absolutely brilliant. I've never been able to find the music. I would love to play it with a duet partner. And then Sharon Isbin is still active. She's hugely talented and extremely popular and important in the classical guitar world. I don't have any pictures of non-white people, but they're there and they're playing. There's a huge South American guitar community, and the Asian community is really coming on strong. If you look on YouTube, you'll find a ton of Chinese, Korean, Japanese women guitar players that are just astounding. It's just amazing what they do. Look up the Beijing guitar duet. They're really good. I'll just point out one thing, because those of you that want to learn to play guitar, Ida Presti had a very different sort of technique. It was self-taught. Apparently she taught herself how to play, went and saw Segovia, who had the traditional technique and the technique that I learned, looked at his playing and said, well, I have nothing to learn from him because she was good enough. And Segovia actually was really impressed with her because what she did. But you could see her wrist is completely bent. See what's going on? It's kind of like with guitar players, most of us play with our fingernails. Not all classical guitarists, but most do. And the way most of us play is we pluck the left side of the finger is what gives us the sound. She did the other side, which my fingernails aren't even shaped to do it. But she did that side, which should sound really good if my fingernails were shaped, which is completely, I mean, I was told, don't hold your wrists like that, you won't be able to change it back. But she played like that. So I think that was an interesting tidbit that none of you care about. I have my conclusions here. So this, remember the picture at the beginning of me? That was, I took this picture, I handed it to AI and said, include this boy in this, a scene like this, and that's what it came up with. So this is me, probably when I was about 8 or 9 years old, maybe 7. And what I want to do is get back to the why is this kid playing guitar when everybody else is doing fun things. And part of it is, well, now we know what the guitar is, now we know kind of a little bit about the music, but really what it is the guitar is, as Segovia said, it's this, yeah, it's like this miniature orchestra. You can get so many different sounds out of the guitar. You can play it by yourself, you can play it with other people, you can play it with different genres. It's really a great instrument to grow up with, because as your interests change, you can always find a way to use it in a band by yourself. Another thing is it's extremely portable. I would like to point out that some of these other instruments are not quite as portable. And that's what I don't know if we have time, but I have one piece I could play that's... No. All right. So this piece, I did not get into Brazilian, South American music, what I should have, because that's actually what I enjoy playing the most. This is a piece by Luis Bonfa, who was one of the virtuoso guitarists that kind of came out of the Bossa Nova era. It's called Walking in Rio. Now I understand it's time for the rebuttal.
Yeah.
Is that right? Questions?
Does anybody have a question? Yeah. Maybe not as fast as I usually. Sorry. I have a little sciatica.
Here, I'll do back.
The girl from Ipanema. Love it. Okay, so this was fantastic. Why classical guitar as opposed to other styles of playing the guitar, and do you play other styles of guitar as well?
Classical is a good foundation. It taught me a lot of different things that I wouldn't have necessarily learned if I'd done other styles. Like, I'm a very good music reader, which is kind of unusual in the classical guitar, in the guitar world. There's a joke: how do you make a guitarist shut up? You put music in front of them. So I got a really good foundation. There's a lot of technique that carries over to all the different things. But the fact of the matter is, I play different styles. I have those guitars we saw at the beginning. Those are a subset of the guitars I have. So I do have steel string guitars. I do play that kind of stuff. I do play rock and roll. I'm in a rock and roll band. I'm in jazz groups. I'm in a duo that we do whatever the heck we want to do, but including some jazz and some other things. So I play all different styles. Classical's really fun because it is this self-contained orchestra that I can sit in the living room, dogs next to me, and I can just play, and it sounds good by itself. I don't need a singer. I don't need a bass player. I don't need drums. Blah, blah, blah. So that's, plus, you know, it's kind of fun. It's kind of mathematical to think about music, which is really interesting. Other questions?
Hello. How many questions am I allowed? All right, just one. So anyway, I noticed that in your first slide, there was a guitar in ancient Egypt, and then big gap until we get to the down.
Yeah, I was hoping you wouldn't notice that. Yeah.
Yeah, about 4,500 years later. So I mean, how did we find it, and was there anything happening in between in terms of the music, or?
I don't know, honestly. All I know is that was what came up when I said, "Give me a slide that shows the history of the evolution of the guitar," which is kind of why I started in the 1500s, because that's where I started having some understanding of what happened. There isn't a lot of music that comes from back then. You know, they didn't write music in the same way, and the style was very, very different than what we would understand today. But yeah, that would be a topic for a different speaker at a different time.
Thanks so much. It's really interesting. You say you're very good at reading music. Have you ever given any thought to composing?
Yeah, here. I just did that. I wrote that in college in an electronic music course. If you heard the full version, there would be screaming and all kinds of electronic noise going on in the background. But yeah, so I've done a little bit. I'm not a big composer. I like to write what I would call songs, so like melodies with chords and kind of, you know, intricate parts, but they're not like as good as a classical composer would do. And I'm the sort of person that doesn't listen to lyrics, so I don't write lyrics because I don't hear them and I have nothing to say. So when I do write things like for the band, I'll say, hey, I've got this song we could do, and they'll say, okay, what, you know, there's a melody and there's chords and the rhythm and stuff, but what are the words? Oh, I didn't write any words, and then we'll move on to something else. So it's kind of a love-hate relationship with writing music that I have.
That's so I think we have one more question.
Oh,
I'm one of those guitar players who can't read music.
yeah.
I saw you drop the guitar to drop D for a second. Do you play in any other weird tunings, like open tunings or anything like that?
No, Tom, wherever Tom does. Tom is a master of that. No, I'm old school. I mostly play straight up normal tuning for guitar. There's occasional call for lute tuning, which is where you tune the G string down to an F sharp. And there's often this thing where you tune down like that, so you can get this. Do you know that? You get that nice. I can do that fluently, but the other tunings, no, I get all tripped up because I read music, and you know, when the note says play a G and the G is now somewhere else in the thing, yeah. Is that it?
All right. I get the chance to be the responder. We always have a responder from Rotary when we have a speaker. And I am honored because you and I, well, secret for everybody in the crowd, I ride bikes with Mark a lot, like 3 to 4 days a week. And he never ceases to amaze me. I'm one of his biggest fans, almost as big a fan as Finley and Maisie, his dogs. Anyways, Mark's wife, Martha, often asks Mark when he gets home, what did you guys talk about? Well, you can imagine what we talk about. I learn something new every time we ride a bike, and I learned stuff new today also. So the Rotary Club wants to thank you for this amazing presentation, and in your honor, we're going to donate 100 doses of the polio vaccine in your name, and so thanks so much for what you did today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.